I've made multiple six figures a year every year for the last 11 years. And I've done this while traveling the world, rarely working more than 30 hours a week and putting a strict limit on how many Zoom calls I do. The good news is you don't need any formal qualifications, decades of experience, or any fancy setup to make this work for you too. All you need is a simple, repeatable process and to understand the 3 specific stages of growing a consultancy business. So clear your tabs, get rid of any background noise, and let's get to it. Stage 1 is what I call the startup. Now, this is just you and a laptop and you're kind of in hustle mode. In many respects, it sometimes feels like you've bitten off more than you can chew, and you might have to kiss a few frogs. This is like your first 12-ish months of consultancy. And it might not be consultancy specifically. You might be a copywriter, a media buyer, you might be a strategist, anything in marketing in general, anything that could be a consultancy business. And at this stage, you're kind of like a hired gun, and you might have to juggle a few different skills as well. So for example, when I was getting into copywriting, whereas now I much more work on a strategic basis, and I do a lot of emails, a lot of ads, when I was starting copy, it'd be sales letters, it'd be advertorials, it'd be product descriptions, I'd write web copy, social media posts, all that kind of thing. The idea with that wasn't that I would do that forever, because I didn't want to be doing all that stuff. It was more that first stage, I just knew I needed to make a good impression. You have to play a bit of a volume game here, because ultimately later down the line, yes, you probably only want a few clients at any one time, but to begin with, you need to build that reputation. You need to build your client portfolio as well. You need to get lots of results, you need to have lots of people knowing your name, and you really need to build that name for yourself. So what I would do is pick a few skills within your industry. So if that is copywriting, for example, maybe that is advertorials, it's ads, it's email sequences, and I don't know, just broadcast emails in general, and get really, really good at those. Spend time studying them. And when I say study, I don't mean just doing the work. I mean actually going away, doing courses, reading from other people who've been there before you, just practicing. Like, you should be working 40 to 50 hours a week at this stage. And if it's not 40 to 50 hours a week of paid work, which in the start it probably won't be, it should be whatever paid work you're doing and then the practice stuff on top. So a mentor of mine, a guy called Dan Meredith, still a really good friend of mine. When he started, he would do 2 hours of writing every single morning. That wasn't client work, that was just him writing sales letters purely for practice. And I was the same. I didn't do mine in the morning because I got into copy when I was a personal trainer. But whenever I had a break from clients, I would practice work. And yeah, over time, that practice got replaced by paid work, which was really cool. But I still kept the practice going. I would still do courses. I would still read stuff. If I was out for a walk, I'd put a copywriting podcast on. I wouldn't listen to music. I wouldn't listen to like general entertainment stuff. I'd immerse myself in what I was studying. For a lot of this, you're probably going to spend more time learning than implementing, and that's okay. You do want to switch to where you're getting paid more for your time than for your learning. But, you know, if you're starting out, the learning is an important process. In this stage as well, your fees aren't going to be through the roof. Now, I'm someone who's big on getting paid what you're worth, and I do think that a lot of people, when they start out, they charge way too low. They get into the mindset of, oh, I'm competing with freelancers who are based in the Philippines, so I can't charge too high. Or they're on the Upwork treadmill where no one wants to pay more than like $200 for a sales letter or $20 for an email. And I wouldn't say to avoid those gigs completely. You want to be charging more than that. But at the same time, when you get somebody who says, oh, just charge $5,000 for a sales letter out the gate, or if you're managing someone's ads for them, charge $2,500 a month, it's probably not going to end well if you do that, because you do kind of need to earn your stripes. So really the most you're going to earn in this stage is probably in that like $5,000 to $7,000 a month mark. And for UK people, that's what, like 3.5 to 5.5K, let's call it. Maybe a bit more, but if you can get up to around there, you're probably not doing too badly. The other thing I'd say in this stage is that you're going to want to network, and network a lot. So I'd be getting myself to free events. I'd be actually knocking on doors at local businesses, introducing myself. There's some great marketing meetups as well. There's one actually coincidentally called the Marketing Meetup, which is nationwide here in the UK. Something like that is amazing for getting to know other people in the creative industries. But this stage should be all about getting your name out there. When I was starting out in copywriting, I spent an hour every single evening after my PT work was done, after my copywriting work was done. I'd be on the laptop networking with people on social media. At the time, it was Facebook. Now it might be Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever. But I would respond to every single comment. I'd draft content for the next day. I would share other people's stuff. Like, doing this is so important because ultimately people go for the person they know. They don't necessarily go for the best. So at this startup stage, you should really view everything you do as like a 50-hour-a-week job. Stage 2 is the expert stage. So you spent 12 months, maybe 18 months, 24 months working your arse off to get where you are. Now is the time when you can kind of cash that in. So you should still be learning here, but your ratio of paid work to learning is probably going to be like 3-to-1, maybe 4-to-1, just because obviously now you have more clients, you've got more people paying you, all that kind of stuff. The good news is you can also up your fees. So in this stage, I would say that you probably don't want to be taking on any work that's less than around about £1,000 to £1,500 or dollars at any one time. And you can probably push your fees up to almost the 5-figure a month mark. That would be for like a bigger project, a retainer, something like that. But around this level, most people are going to be looking at kind of a 6-figure income, which I get is a bit of a cliched phrase. Like 6 figures is very different in some countries to others. It depends on what your costs are, but it's not a bad ballpark to aim for. Your learning here is also going to take a bit of a different format. So rather than just doing free learning, so whether that's like courses you find online, YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, all that kind of stuff, you're probably going to want to pay for courses. And I would definitely recommend paying for coaching as well. When I was at this stage, I think that I had a coach for pretty much non-stop. In actual fact, I've paid for coaching in the last 12 years for about 11 years of that. I've had just a couple of small breaks, but I've always felt the value in paying for a coach. So I had people like Doberman Dan, I had John McIntyre, I did some work with a very skilled copywriter called Darren Hanser, and I was buying courses as well. Find the equivalent of those people in your niche and pay into them. Yes, it does mean you're spending more than when you're in like the hustle mode stage when you were starting out, but that should pay you back multiple times over what you're actually investing every month. The other thing you're going to want to do is niche down a bit more. So taking my copywriting example from level 1, I might niche down into emails, for example. Now, that might be emails across the board, but it's probably going to be even more niche than that. I might niche down into launch sequences, or I might niche down into an industry. So it could be all emails for organic pet food brands, for example. There are pros and cons to this, and I'm not going to say like one is particularly better than the other, but you do want to come across as a specialist. If you think about who you would buy from or who you go to, let's say you're involved in a complex legal case, for example. I'll pick a random one. Let's say you're involved in a stalking case. You wouldn't go to a lawyer who also did probate, who did wills, who did divorce lawyering, divorce, whatever that word is. You would go to someone who specializes in stalking, right? Because that's the obvious person to go to. And it's kind of the same for your business. If you think about someone choosing you from a list of 10 prospects, you would rather be the person who misses out just because you're not the right person for the job than you miss out someone who's a specialist in the same thing that you do. So some of your work's going to have to go, but it's definitely worth it because then you can hold that expert position. You also probably want to think more about the outcomes that you provide. So when you're starting out, you can get away a little bit with being somewhat of a generalist. But as you move into the expert status, you want to get known for solving a problem. So that could be something like you help e-com companies with sorting out their recurring revenue issues. Maybe you're a copywriter who goes in and fixes someone's email sequences. These are all a bit broad, a bit random, but I think you get the idea. Yeah, if someone says we've got a problem, you want to be able to say, I'm the person for that problem. Or better yet, you want to be able to say to people, look, you know that problem when, and then detail the problem, that's what I fix. So for me, that thing now is like, you know that problem when you're the copywriter who feels like their job is constantly at risk? I fix that. I help you sort your positioning, your branding. I help you stand out against AI and get paid for your thinking, so you never have to worry about where the next key is coming from. If you can get your version of that, you're going to do just fine. Another big thing here is that you're going to stop taking orders and start giving them. I don't mean that from the sense of you're going to be shouting at clients, telling them what to do, or you never ever do what you ask, because that's just kind of egotistical. I more mean that clients come to you and they say, okay, what do we need to do? So at level 1, if we take the example of you're a copywriter, at level 1, it's probably going to be like a client comes to you and says, right, we're building out an email sequence. We need 10 emails from you, and we need another 3 abandoned cart emails. We need 4 emails for people who opened but didn't click, and then we need 3 follow-up emails to rebuild trust with the list. At the expert level, you want clients to come to you and say, we want to launch this product, what do we do? Because that kind of working, that just commands higher prices. When clients aren't having to think about what to ask you for, and when they come to you and look at you at the expert, that's where you want to be. You might also have to hire someone at this stage, and I'm thinking maybe a VA, maybe someone do some outreach for you, possibly even someone to close for you. Now, that depends on how you do your sales. I've personally never bothered too much with sales calls. I kind of do them, but they're more just low-key chats with people. But if you are really looking to grow, then actually having someone who sends a certain number of DMs every week, or who responds to comments for you, who handles all that kind of stuff, that's really useful, because then it gives you time to actually do the work you're being paid for. It also gives you time to keep learning and keep developing your craft. So yeah, maybe it's a VA, maybe it's a setter, a closer, something like that. Maybe you even partner with someone as well. So great example would be, if you're a copywriter, can you partner with a designer? That increases your value. Could you partner with a media buyer? So again, when you get bigger clients come to you and say, well, we need copy, but we also need to build our list, rather than you saying, oh, well, that's fine, but have you got your own media buyer, or I can help you find one, which is fine, but it adds friction. You can just say, yep, cool, I've got someone on my team who can handle that. Also, get yourself to big networking events. So you want to be looking at maybe 2, 3, possibly even 4 times a year, getting in a room with people who are paying a lot of money to be there. Now, a lot of money is subjective. In my mind, it's kind of 5-6 grand a time. Now, it doesn't have to be that. I'm not trying to put a price ceiling on it. You can go a bit lower. But if you get one client from each one of those events, that's going to be more than worth it. And finally, what I'd say about this stage is it's a great place to be, because you have more respect, you can call more of the shots, you're getting paid a lot more money, but you're also still quite lean. Your costs aren't that high, so any costs for kind of software and that kind of stuff, probably around about the same as at level 1. You might have that team, you might be paying more for events, for coaching, for masterminds, but most of it should be paying you back. Yes, you have a bigger tax bill, bigger VAT bill if you're in the UK, all that kind of stuff, but your revenue is going to be up a lot from level 1, and your profit should be up almost as much as well. Now, there is a level 3, but before I get to that, I want to talk about level 2.5, which is what I call equity consultancy. Now, this is the model that I use a lot with copywriting, and it's what I used to teach in my Freedom Kickstarter course as well. This works really, really well, because you're getting a lot of the benefits of being bigger than stage 2, but you also get a lot of the benefits from staying small. So your costs aren't up necessarily, you're not having to do a lot more work, you're not having to manage people, but you're making more money. Now, this is the level that a lot of the old school copywriters employed as well. So what they would typically do was, let's say you're a big company like Baudry, and you went to a copywriter like Dan Kennedy, and you said, hey Dan, we would love to hire you to write the promo for our latest campaign on whatever it was. It was normally a health offer or a finance offer. And Dan Kennedy would say, yep, cool, I can do that. It's going to cost you $50,000 to get me to write the package, and I want 20% of all sales after refunds. Clearly, that's a lot more profitable model, right? Because you're getting paid a really nice fee up front anyway, but then you're also getting a percentage of sales on top. Now, the percentage of sales, if the launch flops, then you're not going to get that much, but you've already set a good fee from the start as well. That's where some people mess up with this, is they either don't charge a fee up front and work purely on equity, or they charge too small a fee up front and work on equity. Now, there's a lot of problems with this. Number one being you might not get paid, but also clients have less skin in the game as well. So with this, I would always charge your normal fee up front, but then just put the equity on top. And the cool thing is with this, you can get paid for months, even potentially years down the line. There are several few famous copywriters who did this, but most notably, probably a guy called Clayton Makepeace. So Clayton was famous for making over $1 million a year. I think it was for like 20 years straight, but only ever having 1 or 2 clients during that year, which, I think most of us would say, yeah, that's not a bad business model. I'd happily go for that. So this does sound amazing, but there are some downsides as well. Equity consulting works really well with copywriting type stuff, because you sort of own the deliverable. Whether it's a sales letter, email sequence, all that kind of stuff, it's very easy to track. It's less easy with something like media buying, because there are other costs involved with things like ad spend. Now, if you scale an ad, you could get your equity percentage based on how much you scale, like the return on ad spend, that kind of stuff. But it is just a bit more difficult to manage. And the same with general business consultancy as well. If you're going into a business and you're advising their team on how to do things, yes, you are responsible for a lot of the revenue growth, but are you going to get pushback from the company when they say, well, actually, we did the work? Probably. So if you can find a way to make it work, it can be super profitable, but it doesn't work in every industry, doesn't work for every niche. The other thing with this is there are downsides. As much as we'd like to think that everyone we ever work with is honest and ethical and all that kind of stuff, sometimes clients just don't pay out. They don't give you access to the data. They will kind of pull the plug on an equity deal after a certain number of months. They might say that maybe you do get a control piece that's like the winning piece and making you equity. They make a couple of tiny changes to it and then say, well, we've changed that now. It's our IP. We're not going to pay you anymore. Obviously, there are ways that you can bake this into a contract that doesn't happen. But again, all of this leads back to why it's so important to charge a higher fee and why, as good as this model is, there are still some downsides to it. So stage 3 is the empire level. The first thing I'd say with this is that you might not want to go to this level, and that's totally fine. I know some people who absolutely crush it here. They have agencies, they have their own offers, and we'll talk about that more in a minute, and they love it. They thrive off running a big business, they thrive off managing people, and it's a way that does help them scale, and often they build to actually having something they can sell and something they can exit and then retire, which is amazing. That said, there are definite downsides as well, and what I don't want is I don't want you to watch this and think, oh, that sounds like something that's, it's not quite the lifestyle business I signed up for, and then feel bad about that, because you shouldn't, right? I'm all about building a business that suits you and works best on your terms, and for a lot of people, the empire level is not it. So if you like what I've said about level 1, level 2, absolutely stay there, because that's probably best for you. That said, most people watching this probably are going to want the next level, and if so, that's cool. Level 3 will be for you. And there are 2 ways that we can go about this. Now, the first one is one that I personally am not a fan of, which is not to say it doesn't work. It's just to say that I tried it and I hated it. So option 1 is to kind of build a bit of a bigger business around your main service. So the obvious thing to do is build an agency. So building an agency is something that I did, and then I wouldn't say I regretted, but I pulled the plug on it pretty soon. What I found was that the reason why I got into copywriting was because I loved being creative. I liked doing the work. Winning the business was fine, but I would much rather be the person who won like a new client every month and then spent my time delivering that work. I just enjoyed writing emails. I enjoyed coming up with briefs. I enjoyed being creative, all that kind of stuff. When I started to build an agency, I became much more of a middleman. So my job switched from being the person who did the creative work to the person who ran a business and then talked to other copywriters and got them to deliver the work. And to be honest, I just didn't enjoy communicating with people. I didn't enjoy the editing side of things. It just became much more of a job than what I was doing previously. Additionally, I personally didn't like being responsible for other people's income, which, is not how everyone feels. But for me, I didn't want it to be the case where if I wanted to have a slow month, there was someone else who still needed paying, or if they're working on a per project basis who I couldn't pay and then felt guilty because they were stressed about where the work was coming from. I was also skeptical about training people and then maybe having them jump ship and all that kind of stuff. And there are obviously ways you can get around this. A lot of people run agencies very, very successfully. All I'm saying is that for me, it wasn't the right business model. If it is for you though, amazing. If you like going out and winning business, if you like being the face of the brand, but you don't necessarily love doing the work, an agency model can work brilliantly. And it extends across pretty much any domain in marketing, whether it's copywriting, whether it's media buying, strategy, design, branding, all that kind of stuff. I know a lot of people, including former students of mine, who've gone on and built really good agencies. Some have had 2 or 3 people in them. Some have grown to 15 or 20 people in them, and they've done really, really well. The other cool thing with this is that you can sign much bigger clients. So picture almost like a celebrity or an influencer. What do you think they would prefer? Do you think they would prefer to sign up with a one-person copywriting team who does everything themselves? Or do you think they'd rather go to a big agency? Most of the time it's going to be that big agency just because it feels a bit more professional. If we think about behavioral psychology concepts, it's the idea of the big brand, the logos, the trust symbols, the massive social proof from having 100 clients across the board. That's what they're going to go for. So if you do want to work with clients like that, I'm not saying it's impossible at a lower level, but you probably want to go for the agency route. The downsides, like I said, more admin, more tax, more headaches, more dealing with people. You're responsible for other people's income, all that kind of stuff. So weigh up the pros and cons and decide if it's for you or not. The other option you've got at this level, though, is becoming an offer owner. And that's actually what I chose to do. Because for me, I really enjoy putting together offers. Now, those offers could be outside your space, but it kind of makes sense to make them inside your space. That's why I've had 2 flagship programs, the Freedom Kickstarter course and ABP Mastery. Those being my 2 that I've really tried to grow. There've been others as well, like small side offers and that kind of thing, which have been fun, but FKS and ABP have been my main two. And these are really what's allowed me to scale the business without necessarily scaling my hours and just have a whole lot more freedom. So over the course of about 4 or 5 years, I think we had 650 people go through the Freedom Kickstarter, which was in itself probably about 800 grand's worth of revenue. And then we had people decide to go on and join FKS Pro, which has generated, I think we're over £1 million in revenue in that business now as well. That wouldn't have happened if I'd have stayed at level 2. With ABP, it's earlier days, so it's a bit smaller, but it's probably going to grow to about that level as well. Now, again, those aren't numbers that are going to get a lot of people super excited. They'll probably earn that in a month, right? But for me, for what I want, that kind of setup allows me to have a really nice lifestyle business where I work hard, but I don't work a lot. And I don't think I'd have that with an agency. I love going away and creating a new course. I like coaching students, all that kind of thing. The coaching side of thing isn't as scalable, but certainly the offer creation is. You know, you have a product, you have a course, something like that. You create it once. The work's kind of the same whether 10 people or 10,000 people buy it. And that's what I think is really cool at this level. As with anything though, there are downsides to this as well. So the downside is that you need some sort of audience. And that means that you either have to spend a lot of time building on social media, where you're not paying money, but you are paying with your time, or you have to pay money and build it through ads, or ideally you do both, right? So there are costs involved to this. Also, what I'd say is your price point's typically lower. So if you have an agency, you're probably going to be charging minimum 3-4 grand a month per client. If you're an offer owner, yeah, you could charge 3-5 grand for a course. Like I have courses that are up to about 6 grand, but most of the time they're going to be in that £500 or dollars to £1,000 or dollars mark. So you need a higher volume. Again, that relates back to needing the audience as well. There are also costs involved, like software creation, that kind of thing. And as much as people sell the passive income dream, it's a bit more work than sometimes it's made out to be. You will probably need to create multiple products over the long term because people buy once and that's kind of it. They might buy into a continuation program, but ultimately an offer usually sells just once. So you're going to have to need to think about, how can I create a recurring revenue community around this? Or how can I create other upsells, other cross sells, things that people need to buy more of? So actually it's not just a one and done type purchase. The other thing with this is that if you are still providing a service like I do, then sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to differentiate your offers and what you're doing. So I find that I have to be very conscious when I'm posting on social media, when I'm sending emails, not to confuse the audience. I have to be very direct and very deliberate about how I'm showing up. Am I Mike, the copywriter and strategist, or am I Mike, the person who helps copywriters and strategists? So that kind of has to come in seasons, and you need a detailed plan about how you go about that. So ultimately, what should you do if you're trying to grow a multi-6-figure consultancy business? Well, it's super cliche to say, but it's probably up to you. Like I said, you're not going to do it at level 1. That's kind of a 50, 60 grand a year job at most. And I use the word job kind of deliberately because that's what it's going to feel like a lot of the time. Yes, you'll probably have some freedom, but the client's going to treat you a little bit more like an intern than they are a trusted advisor. At that level 2, I do think you can make a multi-6-figure income. I did it, but it was a lot of work. I was still doing most of it myself. I had some equity deals. It probably would have been easier with more of them, but you definitely need to be more of a big name in your space to do that. And I think that this level works really well if you want a well-paid lifestyle business, but not if you want to build for something you can actually sell. So then you've got level 3. There's definitely more stress here, but at the same time, the payoffs are bigger. Whether you go the agency style route or whether you go the offer owner route, you've got a lot more scope to actually build something, potentially to sell it in the future. Now, that might not be the case, right? I don't think that anyone's going to come in with an offer to buy any of my offers because there's too much of me in them. But that's how I like to run it, and I'm perfectly okay with that. So the whole point of this video was to show you how you can build a multi-6-figure consultancy business. And like I said, there are a few paths to do this, and really, as cliche as it sounds, it kind of is all down to you. So have a think about what one of these models suits your personality best. And also think specifically about the downsides. A lot of people get into a model because they only think about the cool stuff and think about the benefits. And then when they get into it, they realize that it doesn't suit their personality, it doesn't suit their lifestyle, or they just don't enjoy the amount of work involved. So be realistic with the path you follow and go for the one that suits you best.